Hey everyone, George here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a variety of fish that have a reputation of being rather difficult and actually expensive as well. And to be honest with you, that could not be further from the truth. These fish are probably fish that you already have in your aquarium and don't even know it. What I'm talking about is the Dwarf ram cichlid family and the Apistogramma. Now, if you are thinking of these two fish, you probably don't even know it, but if you are keeping angelfish or you're keeping discus, you're already keeping this family of fish in your tanks already. So I want to talk to you today about how you can bring just vibrance and beauty and personality to your tank that you probably never thought that you could, and you can even rival some of your saltwater friends with some of the most beautiful fish from South America that I have ever seen. We're going to talk about that today, and we're going to get to that in just a second here. So the Apistogramma, aka dwarf cichlid, is actually a South American fish found in the Amazon region, some of the basins and tributaries around that area. They're absolutely stunning fish. The color palette on these guys ranges from blues to yellows to red, deep red, flame red, orange. You name it, they can pretty much be found in just about every color you can think of. They really do break the mold as far as the color spectrum that you can find these in. For their size and their temperament, these guys are actually very timid fish sometimes. They can be a little bit territorial as far as taking a small part of a tank and using it for an area in which they will stake out a small part of that tank, and they'll protect that area, but they are not aggressive in the sense that they will roam the tank looking for trouble with other fish. Now you do have exceptions to that. Every fish does, but as far as these guys go, I wouldn't worry about that too much. That's usually not the norm. That would be more the exception than anything else. As far as the size of these fish, they are really going to be from a quarter of an inch up to about 3.1 inches in size maximum. That's really full grown. As far as how long they live, lifespan, we are looking at fish that live anywhere from 5 to 10 years depending on the conditions of your tank. And that would be, the 10 years would be the real high end of that spectrum, of course, and that would be ideal conditions and really more of an exception than the rule. So I would expect that these fish would last, as far as their lifespan, somewhere between 5 to 7 years if the conditions are good. Talking about water conditions, these fish really do need to have some conditions in which you have to pay a little bit of attention, and this is where you can get into trouble with these fish if you're not careful. Their pH needs to be anywhere from 6.0 to 7.0, which is neutral. Anything beyond that they don't like. Anything below the 6.0 they don't like. But I try to keep mine at 7.0 and they do really well. As far as water hardness, they're not particularly difficult to deal with on that either. But you do want to make sure that you are keeping their, like I said, their pH in good condition as far as that goes. But one of the other things that I would say about water condition and tank size, which kind of go together here, I would be careful to make sure that you are doing water changes at least once a week. I would do a quarter of a water change in the tank. Don't overfeed. These fish can be a little bit finicky on food, and you can end up dumping way too much food in there unless you're putting in a community tank. Of course, the other fish will take up the slack on eating the rest of the food. Make sure you do have some good bottom feeders in there that are going to take care of that, because these fish, as I said, they're kind of not picky about the food, but they like to pick food off the bottom of the tank. They're not going to be really terribly aggressive about running around the tank and eating food that's floating in the water. They will do that, of course, but they're not really going to be aggressive in that way. As far as tank size goes, I have seen pairs of German blue dwarf cichlids in 10-gallon tanks, a pair of those along with some other smaller fish and bottom feeders, and they do just fine. I don't recommend that. I do recommend that you have at least a 20-gallon to 35-gallon tank. As far as their tank mates go, I would be not hesitant to put them in with probably, I would say cardinals, some neon tetras. Most tetras that are schooling fish, rummy-nosed tetras, are going to do well. You're going to have no problems with them being with pencilfish, pygmy corydoras, autocinclus, bristlenose plecos. Any fish that's pretty much the same size. Various types of Rasporus, like the Galaxy Raspora, is one of my favorites to put in there with them, along with some cardinals. Makes a really beautiful tank. When we are talking about tank conditions again, I really want to make sure you understand that the water temperature that these guys need to be in is anywhere from 72 to 86 degrees. I would never put these fish in 72 degrees. I would keep them somewhere between 80 and 82 degrees. I have found that that's really ideal to keep these guys in that particular size tank. Now, as I said, they're South American basin fish along the Amazon basin, and so they do not like a real heavy flow in the tank either. These fish are going to really do best in a tank that has a slow flow or a well-directed flow to keep that from being real strong currents or anything like that. They don't really like that particular atmosphere, so I would be careful about that as far as what you're thinking about doing with these fish in your tank as far as the conditions in which they need to be in. Other concerns about the tank is you really do need to have these in a planted tank where they can hide and have places that they can stake out. I plant all of my tanks very heavily, and I know that's not always possible. If you can't do that, plant as much as you possibly can. Put lots of rockery in there when you're scaping, so that there are places for these fish to kind of stake out an area where they feel comfortable and don't feel threatened in some way by maybe larger fish that you might have in the tank, like angels or something like that. The angels aren't going to particularly bother them. They are part of the cichlid family, as I mentioned in my intro, but they're not going to probably bother these fish too much. As far as that goes, I would just, like I said, make sure that you're putting them in a condition where they do have plenty of places to hide. As far as lighting goes, make sure that with your lighting you have the ability to shade an area out where these guys can go, because really bright light is sometimes going to cause these guys to go to dark areas of the tank, if there are any. If you have some shaded areas where you have them openly shaded, that's really best, because that gives you an opportunity to see these fish. They sometimes are hiders anyway. When you first get them, as you get to know them, they can be very interactive. So pretty cool fish in that sense, but as I said, they really can be a little bit timid. Lighting can have a lot to do with that. Just be careful about that. Common diseases are a lot of times you're going to see that these guys get more problems with parasitic infections and sometimes even ick. I hate to say that because ick is something we all dread, but I would suggest that you put these guys in a quarantine tank when you get them, just to kind of make sure, even if you know your breeder or your supplier, put them in a tank where they are going to be watched for a while, and make sure that they don't have diseases that are going to spread around the rest of your tank. That's just a good practice anyway. As far as food goes, any kind of food that has some good protein and algae. Now, believe it or not, these fish do like to have a little bit of algae in their diet. They do like live food, so if you do have the ability to get like black worms or red worms or Daphne, brine shrimp, any of those things are going to be really well accepted by these fish, and they're going to really enjoy that. As far as, like I said, their temperament, they can be a little bit territorial, but I wouldn't worry about that too much. I would just be careful to make sure that you have plenty of room in your tank. That's why I said 20 to 35 gallons is my recommendation. Breeding, I'm not going to talk about that because I've never bred these fish, and I really don't want to get into the breeding aspect of this because I don't know enough about it to really give you good advice on that. There's plenty of places you can go online to find out about breeding, or you can talk to somebody that raises these fish and they can give you a lot of information. You should be pretty comfortable with the fundamentals of keeping Apistogrammas or dwarf cichlids in your aquarium. They definitely can be a challenge at times, but it's a darn rewarding thing to see these fish thrive, and they will if you really do spend some time with them. Dwarf cichlids are a species intended on keeping for a long period of time, so you want to make sure you've got a tank where you can offer up a really good place for them to thrive, and like I said, they will do that. I want to thank you guys for listening to the video and for joining me today. Please make sure you do hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button, and also leave your comments. Anything that I said today that you might not agree with, leave a comment below and I will get back to you on that. If there's anything that I didn't cover and you want to ask me some questions about that, do that as well. Anyways, thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. We'll talk again soon. Hit that bell at the top as well. That tells you when my next video is coming out. Take care now and have a wonderful, wonderful time enjoying these beautiful, really cool fish. Hey everybody, thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this species profile. These fish, the Apistogramma and the dwarf cichlids, are really beautiful fish. They're not anything to be afraid of. If you have a little bit of experience, like I said, this is really not for newbie people. I don't recommend that, but if you've got a little bit of experience with taking care of fish and you do have some mature 20 to 35 gallon tanks, man, these are great additions to that tank. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Like I said a couple of videos ago, we're going to be doing a 50-gallon build here, just waiting on that equipment to get here. As soon as it does, we're going to be taking that on. Until then, see you soon.